Hello everyone. Today I'm giving an overview of the more popular woodworking products so that you can determine which ones you might want to use or what you might want to do more research on. So let's jump right in. So the first thing I want to talk about is coloring the wood. But before I start on that, you should understand that no matter what finish you use, no matter what project you have, that finish is going to have to be redone or refurbished at some time in the future. And that could be anywhere from 3 months to 30 or 40 years. It depends on the project, how much wear and tear it gets, what kind of wood it is, what kind of finish you put on it. So there's all sorts of aspects, but it is going to have to get redone or refinished at some point in the future. So keep that in mind, and I'll talk more about that in the future. So let's talk about dyes and stains, coloring the wood first of all. When it comes to coloring wood, there's basically two options, stains and dyes. And stains are very popular. They're typically ground up earthen products. And when you put them on, let them sit for a while and then wipe them off. They color the wood, but they also leave a very thin film of ground up rock on your project, which tends to mask the grain. Aniline dyes, on the other hand, are synthetically manufactured. You can see even by moving the glass around that they are semi-transparent. They soak into the wood much more readily. Not UV resistant, but they do give a nice coloring, and they come in a wide variety of colors. Now, one of the reasons that you might want to use a dye over a stain, for example, is when you don't want to lose what we call the chatoyance, and that's when we have figured woods here. I have bird's eye maple here and tiger maple here. And when you move these woods, they tend to have an iridescent, they sort of tend to change their look. And I'm going to show you that in a minute here. And that's what an aniline dye does not mask, that grain structure. What happens with bird's eye maple, the grain grows in this direction and in this direction. And that's what gives it that sort of iridescent look. And tiger maple grows like this, and the same thing is it. So I'm going to turn this wood, and you're going to see how the wood sort of appears to look differently depending on how the light hits it. So dyes and stains, neither one of them are right or wrong. They just have different applications. Stains, for example, are perfect for outdoor projects because they're very UV resistant. Dyes, on the other hand, if you have a special grain or a special wood that you want to enhance, you might want to think about using a dye that will help enhance that wood for you a little bit more. Aniline dyes can come as a powder, or they can come in a concentrated liquid form. They do come in a wide variety of earthen colors, but they also come in other colors. For example, you can get blue and green and red, but most of it, of course, are earthen colors. Now, I actually mix my own. I get my concentrates, and then I mix a few drops of one and a few drops of other to get different colors that I want depending on the project that I'm working with. Now, one of the things that I also do from time to time, I ebonize wood, and you can see there's an ebony label on that one. And when you ebonize wood, typically you're using it as a highlight. Now, I showed this a while back. This is actually Purple Heart, but if you don't have Purple Heart, you could do the same, say, on the corner of a box or maybe on picture frames. You could put a little highlight on there, and ebony is a great wood to use that. Now, it's a very expensive wood to purchase, but you can make your own. And the way you do that is you dye wood. You get some ebony dye, and you just make your own concentrate or your own working mixture, and you can dye a little piece of wood like this. Now, one of the secrets that I found out about a long time ago, a friend of mine taught fine woodworking at one of the colleges, and one day one of his students came in. She had just super black hair. It was as black as a black cat in a coal mine, and he asked her, how do you get your hair so dark? It's super dark. And she said, well, we start off with blue. We put blue on, we dye our hair blue, and then we put black on over top of it, and it makes it super dark. And I've actually tried that, and you can see that. This is ebony dye over here, and this is blue and then ebony over top of it, and you can see how much darker this is. And there on the side you can see there's the blue, and I painted the side of it a little bit. So it's a little secret. I didn't invent it, but this is one way that you can get a very dark, because when you make an ebony stain or an ebony piece of wood, you want it to be as black as you can get it. And of course you can keep re-dyeing. You can dye over top, and you may get that as well. But another way of doing it is to undercoat with blue. It's a little secret. I didn't invent it, but it's apparently it's used in the hair industry. So there's one way of making some ebony for some great highlights. So let's talk now about top coat finishes. After you've already put a colorant on, you need to top coat that. And I break them down into sort of three categories: the film-based finishes, the oil-based finishes, and what I call the hybrids. And we're going to talk about each one of these in a little bit of detail. So let's talk first of all about the film finishes. Now, when I say a film finish, what I mean is a product that sits on top of the wood, much like this film finish. They actually sit right on top. Now, the advantage is, of course, it gives a really good protection to the wood. They're usually waterproof. The disadvantage is if and when you have to refinish these, most of them you have to sand them right back down to the bare wood and refinish them that way. That's the disadvantage of them. Now, they also come in three different looks. There's a high gloss, which of course is very popular. There's something called a satin, and you can also get a matte. And if you get anything but high gloss, you need to make sure that you mix it thoroughly. And here's the reason why. When you get something that is a satin, they are mixing, see that glob there? That in there is silica that they mix in there, and the silica is what gives the satin look. You can see that this is satin. That's what gives the satin look. So you have to keep stirring this in order to keep that silica suspended in there, so that when you paint it on, it stays there and it gives that satin look. If you don't stir it, you end up with a gloss, a high gloss. And if you partially stir it, some of it's glossy and some of it's satin. So you really need to watch what you're doing with that. They also come in water-based and spirit-based. Let's talk about oil finishes for a moment. Oil finishes have been very popular in the last few years, and I kind of break them down into three sections. These are the raw oils here. The problem with raw oils is they take forever to dry. They're typically used on cutting boards because they're food safe, but we don't use them that often for furniture just because they take so long to dry. So we'll move those off to the side. The center one here are what we call hardening oils, and they typically dry and harden overnight. And the most popular of these are tung oil and boiled linseed oil. Linseed oil is basically flax oil. If you buy this in the health food store, it's called raw flax oil, and it has the same drying properties as these. So you don't want to use that on your wood projects. Purchase the boiled linseed oil from the hardware store, and it will dry basically overnight so that you can recoat 2 or 3 coats, as many as you want. The nice thing with hardening oils is that when you come to refinish them, which might be years later, you don't have to remove the oil that's there or the finish that's there. You just coat over top of it and it revitalizes your project. It looks as good as new. It's that easy to replenish. The difficulty with oils is that they are not waterproof. They often are water resistant, so if you spill something on it, if you wipe it up right away, it doesn't soak into the wood. That's the advantage of having oils. Very easy to work with. In more recent years, these hard wax oils have been popular, especially in the last 4 or 5 years. I've been using hard wax oils for over 20 years now. I'll put a link to one of my original videos from 2012 where I had Phil come in and do a demonstration on how to use these. These are very popular now, an excellent product. They were originally designed as a flooring product, so despite the fact that it's an oil, it's a very hard product and gives just an excellent finish. So if you haven't used one of these hard wax oils, it might be something that you want to try out. And a little can is expensive, but it goes a long, long way. The final category today I want to talk about are what I call the hybrids. And I call them hybrids because lots of people, for example, make teak oil, but we never really know what's in it because they don't publish what the ingredients are. And I happen to know that in most cases, the main ingredient in teak oil is actually linseed oil. So, but there's other ingredients that they can put in that we just don't know. Same with Danish oil. Good product, but and many people, many manufacturers make it, but we never know what's in it because they don't publish the ingredients in it. The problem with Danish oil is that sometimes there is varnish in it, and when you coat a project with varnish and oil, for example, the varnish sticks to the outside of the wood, so it doesn't allow the oil to penetrate. So years later, when you go to refinish, and maybe you're going to refinish with tung oil because your first ingredient was Danish oil, and when you lay the tung oil on top, it just sits there. It doesn't dry. It doesn't blend, it doesn't soak into the wood like it should because the varnish is preventing it from soaking in. That's the varnish from the Danish oil. So you end up with a big mess that you have to sand or scrape off. So you have to be careful with these hybrids when you're using them because we never really know exactly what's in them. Now the last one that is not a real hybrid, but I'm calling shellac a hybrid because we purchased the shellac flakes and then we mix it with methyl hydrate and it gives us this solution. This is an excellent product. I use this all the time. It's only good for 3 months. You have to remix it, so you need to make sure you label it. But the flakes are the secretion from the lac bug. A lot of people will tell you that it's poop from the lac bug. It is not. And the reason we know that is because they scrape the lac, the female lac bug secretes this tar onto the branches, and then they have to scrape it off and process it in order to make these shellac flakes. If it was bug poop, all they would have to do is lay tarps underneath the trees and collect it that way, but they don't do that. So you can start calling out people who tell you that this is bug poop. Let's start getting rid of these false myths and call things what they are. Now, what I'm going to do today, because I have an old formula, I know of an old formula for Danish oil, I'm going to make my own Danish oil today, just so that you'll understand what's in some of these hybrids. Now, what I know for certain is an old formula for Danish oil is 1 part varnish, 1 part tung oil, and 1 part turpentine or mineral spirits. And when we mix that all together, guess what? I've just made my own Collins version of Danish oil. But look, in the store, you can get colored Danish oil. And I can add a couple of drops of aniline dye. And look, now I have a colored Danish oil, just like I can buy in the store. Only I can make mine for much, much less than what they pay in the store. And that is why we have to be careful with hybrids, because now I've mixed varnish with oil and turpentine, and that's going to give a very different coating than, say, what a true oil like a tung oil or a linseed oil is going to give. So that's what we need to make sure that we know what we're putting on our wood projects. And I have one last little secret for you today, and that is something called Japan Dryer. For any of you who are using polyurethanes and varnishes, any oil-based product, this is a dryer, and it speeds up the drying and the hardening of it. And there is a formula on the back of the bottle. Comes in different sizes, of course. And for those of you who are interested, I broke down the formula in the article on Woodwork Web. You'll be able to go and check that out as well. Well, that concludes my video for today. You know, there's so much information on wood finishing. There's no way I could cover it in this video, but what I wanted to do was to give you sort of a lead if you want to do more research in different colorants or more research on different kinds of finishes. This video will hopefully help you get sort of a leapfrog into that. And one of my favorite finishes is Osmo, and I've been using it for, I think, like 15, almost 20 years now. And Phil is the one who taught me how to do it. That video is showing up here. You'll be able to go and see from one of the experts on Osmo on what he uses for his process. So I'm Colin Canet for Woodwork Web. Thanks for watching.